Snow fell in heavy, breathless silence as Emily stood outside the small community centre where her family had gathered for Christmas Eve relief support. It wasn't a place anyone hoped to spend the holiday, but after her husband Daniel lost his job and their savings evaporated, this was where they landed, between fear and the unknown, wrapped in the quiet ache of what used to be. She pressed her hands together, trying to calm the trembling she didn't want her daughter Lily to see. Every sound felt louder tonight: the creak of the old door, the murmur of volunteers, the distant wind clawing at the windows. Christmas was supposed to feel warm, safe, but this one felt like a test she wasn't prepared for. Yet just as Emily tried to steady her breath, something strange happened. A soft, ordinary moment, so simple she almost missed it, cut through the heaviness. Lily tugged her coat, lifted a small toy someone had given her, and said with a quiet certainty far beyond her years, "Mom, God's still with us. I can feel it." Emily froze. Those 6 words fell into her heart like a spark in the dark, and in that instant she wondered, was this the Christmas when everything broke? Or the one when God finally showed her what he had been doing all along? The community centre wasn't festive, not in the way Emily remembered Christmas being when life was simpler. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow on the folding tables lined with donated meals and second-hand coats. Volunteers moved with practiced gentleness, offering smiles that tried, sometimes unsuccessfully, to cover the exhaustion of a long season of need. Emily guided Lily toward a corner where Daniel sat, shoulders curled forward as if trying to make himself smaller. He hadn't shaved in days. The weight of unemployment had pressed lines into his face that hadn't been there the year before. He looked up when he heard them approach, and though he tried to smile, the sadness behind it couldn't hide. Lily climbed onto the chair beside him, clutching her little toy, a stuffed bear missing an ear. "Daddy, we're together. That means God's taking care of us, right?" Daniel blinked, momentarily thrown. Emily saw the question land in him like a quiet challenge. "Do you still believe God can carry you, even now?" He nodded softly and brushed Lily's hair back. "Yes, he hasn't left us." But when his eyes flicked toward Emily, she saw the truth. He didn't feel it. Not tonight. Emily sat across from them, unzipping her worn coat. Their circumstances still felt unreal. How one unexpected layoff had flipped their lives upside down. How bills had piled faster than solutions. How Christmas had become another reminder of everything they'd lost. And yet, they were here, together, surviving. Every few minutes, the wind outside rattled the thin windows, looping the tension back into the air. Emily found herself staring at the entrance door, hoping for some sign, any sign, that things would turn. She'd always believed God worked in quiet ways, but the silence of this season had been deafening. A volunteer named Mark approached, carrying 3 trays of warm food. "Merry Christmas," he said with a sincerity that made Emily's throat tighten. He wasn't pretending the situation was cheerful. He was simply offering kindness, and somehow that was enough. Lily brightened instantly. Daniel murmured his thanks. Emily whispered, barely audible, "Thank you, Lord," not because everything was good, but because she needed to anchor herself to the smallest grace she could recognize. Gratitude felt like a fragile step, but it was still a step. As they ate, Emily watched other families, some with more pain in their eyes than she dared imagine. A mother rocking her infant while trying to hide tears. An elderly man staring at his hands as if remembering a life that had slipped away. A teenage boy folding up his coat so his younger sister could use it as a pillow. These glimpses tugged at Emily's heart, reminding her that suffering wasn't selective. Everyone carried a story. Everyone carried a storm. And yet, every few minutes, something small unfolded. Someone sharing their meal, a volunteer adjusting a heater, a stranger offering a seat. micro moments of humanity looping in gentle rhythm, chipping away at the heaviness in the room. Daniel glanced around, his expression softening. "I didn't realize," he whispered. "We're not alone in this." Emily reached across the table, touching his hand, an active choice, not a reflex. "We're not abandoned," she said, her voice steady despite the fear still stirring inside her. "And I believe, somehow, God will use this." Daniel didn't fully believe it yet. She could tell, but he didn't argue either. He simply nodded, as if allowing a seed to settle somewhere deep inside, even if he didn't understand it. Lily leaned her head on Emily's arm, humming a small tune, a simple melody she'd made up, soft and sweet. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't polished, but Emily felt something stir in her chest listening to it. It sounded like worship in its purest form, innocent, grateful, quietly trusting. Emily closed her eyes just for a breath, absorbing the moment. Despite everything, God's presence felt close, not loud, not dramatic, but present in the way only God could be, through peace that didn't make sense. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Daniel watching her, not lost, not broken, just searching. And she knew this Christmas Eve was becoming something deeper than hardship. It was becoming a place where fear would be tested and maybe transformed. The doors of the community center opened again, letting in a rush of icy wind, and with it came the one person Emily prayed wouldn't show up tonight, Mr. Alden, their former landlord. She recognized his heavy steps instantly, the sound echoing through the room like a warning drum. He wasn't here to help. He never came to places like this unless he had a reason. Emily's chest tightened. Daniel straightened, instinctively placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. Microloops of whispers stirred across the room as people noticed the tension forming like a storm cloud. Mr. Alden scanned the tables until his eyes locked onto them, and then he walked straight over. "Daniel," he said, voice sharp, "I've been looking for you." Emily felt every gaze in the room shift toward them. People stopped eating. Conversations froze. Judgment spread like ripples on water. Daniel stood. "Now's not the time," he murmured, keeping his voice low so Lily wouldn't hear the strain. "It is," Mr. Alden snapped. "You left the place a mess when you moved out, and you still owe me for last month's rent." Emily's face burned. They had cleaned the apartment for hours the night they left, but they had left behind a broken heater, one that had already been breaking long before they ever touched it. They simply couldn't afford repairs. And now, in front of strangers, that truth became fuel for humiliation. "We did our best," Emily said quietly. "Your best wasn't enough." His words cut deep, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Murmurs rose around them, judging, assuming, misunderstanding. A woman nearby pulled her child a little closer, as if poverty were contagious. A volunteer exchanged a helpless glance with another, unsure whether to intervene. Daniel clenched his jaw. "We aren't trying to avoid responsibility," he said. "We're just trying to get back on our feet." Mr. Alden scoffed. "Funny way of showing it, letting the whole town take care of you." Emily felt the humiliation settle like a heavy stone, not because she believed any of his accusations, but because Lily was watching. She wasn't supposed to learn shame like this, not now, not at Christmas. The room held its breath. Emily could feel the weight of every stare. Her fear looped again, tightening, rising, pressing into her ribs. Lily tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Daniel crouched beside her, voice gentle but trembling at the edges. "No, sweetheart, we're okay." But his eyes said otherwise. The tension broke when Mark, the volunteer, stepped forward. "This isn't the place for that," he said firmly. "Tonight is for helping families, not tearing them down." Mr. Alden shot him a glare but didn't argue. He turned back to Emily. "I'll be expecting payment, sooner rather than later." Then he walked away, leaving the air colder than the snow outside. Emily sat slowly, her hands shaking. Shame lingered like smoke, curling through her thoughts. The whispers continued. Even if she couldn't hear the words, she felt them. Daniel dropped into the chair beside her, defeated. "I can't even protect you from this," he whispered. Emily inhaled deeply, fighting the tears pressing behind her eyes. She refused to let this moment define them. "We're still standing," she said softly, "and God sees us." Daniel looked at her, torn between hope and disbelief. The judgment hurt. The loss of dignity stung. But deep within the ache, something resilient flickered. A reminder that fear wasn't the end of their story. There was something waiting beyond this night, even if they couldn't see it yet. The room slowly settled back into a fragile calm, but Emily couldn't shake the sting of what had just happened. Shame tried to cling to her like frost, whispering old lies. "You're failing. You're forgotten. You're alone." She pressed her fingers together, grounding herself against the rising storm inside. She needed space, just a few moments away from the noise. Emily stood and stepped into the hallway outside the main room. It was empty, quiet except for the distant hum of an aging heater. The stillness wrapped around her like a thin blanket, worn, but enough. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. For the first time that evening, the fear she'd been holding back seeped through the cracks. How long could they survive like this? When would things turn? Was God really still weaving something good behind the scenes, or was she just imagining it? A soft thought rose, gentle, persistent, impossible to ignore. "Look deeper. I'm here." Emily exhaled slowly, the tightness in her chest loosening just a little. She whispered a short, trembling prayer, one that came not from rehearsed faith, but from a bruised heart reaching upward. "Lord, guide me. Give me strength to walk this path you prepared." The words felt small, but honest, and somehow they felt heard. She stayed in the quiet for a moment longer. The hallway wasn't a chapel, but the stillness felt sacred, not because of decorations or rituals, but because her heart had finally stopped running long enough to listen. She lifted her head, breathing in the peace that gently settled over her. When she walked back into the room, she noticed details she'd missed before. Volunteers moving with quiet compassion, families supporting one another without pride, children sharing toys without hesitation. These weren't scenes of defeat. They were scenes of people choosing hope in the middle of hardship. Daniel looked up as she approached. Something in his expression softened, as if he sensed a shift in her spirit. "You okay?" he asked. Emily nodded. "I think, yes, not because everything changed, but because God is still with us, even here." Daniel's shoulders eased, the weight he carried no longer crushing him the way it had an hour ago. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Her certainty steadied him. Fear was still lingering, yes, but it was losing its grip. Faith, even in its smallest form, was beginning to breathe again. Emily sat down beside Daniel again, her presence calmer now, steadier, like she carried a quiet light he couldn't quite explain. Lily leaned against her, sensing the shift even without understanding it. The heaviness of the night hadn't vanished, but something had changed in the way Emily held it. Daniel watched her, almost studying her. "You really believe God is still working, even after all this?" Emily squeezed his hand. "I do, and I think we're about to see why." A subtle micro-loop formed as the camera would linger on their hands, their breath, their hope flickering back to life. The viewer feels the turning point coming, not dramatic, but intentional. And in that soft pause, a narrator voice would naturally invite the audience in. "If this moment is speaking to your heart, stay with us. What happens next will show how God can turn the smallest spark of faith into something you never expected." Because the story was only beginning to shift, and the blessing was already on its way. A gentle knock interrupted the quiet rhythm of the room. It wasn't loud, but it carried a kind of intention that made several volunteers turn their heads. The door opened, and a woman stepped inside, older, wrapped in a thick coat dusted with snow. Emily didn't recognize her, but something about the woman's presence drew attention without asking for it. She walked with slow, careful steps toward the volunteer desk, speaking quietly to Mark. He nodded, surprise flashing across his face before he gestured toward Emily's family. The woman approached them with a soft smile. "Are you the Harris family?" Emily exchanged a quick glance with Daniel. "Yes." "Can we help you?" The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a battered notebook, its edges frayed. "My name is Mrs. Whitlock. I used to live next door to your old place." She paused, eyes gentle. "I found something after you moved out. I wasn't sure if it mattered, but tonight I felt I needed to bring it." She handed Emily the notebook. Emily opened it slowly, and her breath hitched. It was Lily's little journal, the one she used to draw in every night before they packed everything in a rush. Page after page was filled with simple crayon pictures, family dinners, playgrounds, warm houses. But what struck Emily most were the words scribbled at the bottom of so many pages. "God, thank you for my family. God, help us when things get scary. God is with us." Emily covered her mouth, holding back emotion. Each loop of childlike faith felt like a message sent forward to this very moment, reminding her of what she had forgotten. God had been moving long before she felt him. Mrs. Whitlock continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know what your family was going through, but my husband and I prayed about this notebook, and we felt led to come here tonight." She reached into her coat again, this time pulling out an envelope. "We want to help you get back on your feet. Not alone. A gift." She placed it gently on the table. "Consider it a little reflection of God's love. He hasn't forgotten you." Daniel stared at the envelope, as if it were something fragile. "Why us?" Mrs. Whitlock smiled. "Because your daughter reminded me what faith looks like, and because sometimes God asks us to step in exactly when someone feels like giving up." When she walked away, Emily finally opened the envelope. Her breath caught. Inside was enough money to settle their debt with Mr. Alden and still have enough left to stabilize them through the next month. Emily closed her eyes, the blessing overwhelming her. A soft wave of gratitude rose from deep inside her. Quiet, unforced, holy. She whispered, "Thank you, God. You really never left us." Daniel covered his face with his hands, emotion shaking through him. But when he lifted his head, it wasn't despair shining in his eyes. It was the first true spark of hope he'd felt in months. Lily climbed onto his lap, beaming. "See, Daddy, God's still with us." Emily held both of them close, her heart swelling with worship, not the loud kind, not the rehearsed kind, but a simple, grateful stirring. God was here the whole time, and he was already turning the page. The envelope lay on the table between them, a symbol of hope they hadn't expected, but hope is often tested before it settles, and that test came sooner than Emily imagined. Just as she slipped the envelope into her coat, the lights overhead flickered. Once, twice, then the entire community center went dark. A few gasps broke the silence, followed by the metallic groan of the old heating system shutting down. The sudden cold felt immediate, sharp, unwelcome. Children clung to parents. Volunteers scrambled for flashlights. Someone near the entrance muttered, "Not tonight, please, not tonight." Emily held Lily's hand tightly. "It's okay," she whispered, though tension crawled up her spine. Losing power here meant losing heat, and the temperature outside was dropping fast. Mark moved through the shadows, voice steady but strained. "Everyone, stay calm. We'll get the backup generator running." But then Mr. Olden, who had been lingering near the exit, spoke up for everyone to hear. "This is unbelievable. Maybe if this place wasn't filled with people who can't pay their bills, the town wouldn't be stretched so thin." The words cut through the darkness deeper than any cold wind. Emily felt Daniel tense beside her. Judgment returned like a familiar storm, circling them with whispers they couldn't quite hear but could feel. Fear began looping again, pressing into the hope they had just received, trying to suffocate it. Daniel stepped forward. "Sir, this isn't the time." But Mr. Alden scoffed. "It never is it?" A few heads turned. Some nodded in quiet disagreement. Others looked away, not wanting to get involved. Emily felt something stir inside her, not anger, but clarity. This wasn't about Mr. Alden. This was about the old voices of fear trying to reclaim their ground. Then the cold deepened. Mark returned, face pale. "The generator won't start. We're calling the fire department for temporary heaters, but it could take a while." People shifted closer together, trying to keep warm. Parents wrapped coats around children. The room filled with quiet worry. Emily looked at Lily, shivering in her arms. The blessing they'd just received suddenly felt fragile, like it could be threatened by the simple reality that warmth, safety, and stability were still out of reach. Daniel's voice was tight. "We should take everyone home. At least for now." Emily shook her head. "We can't. The roads are freezing over. It's safer here than out there." He rubbed his face, torn. I thought we were finally turning a corner." Emily reached for his hand, grounding him. "We are. But blessings don't erase trials. They carry us through them." A volunteer handed out blankets. Emily wrapped one around Lily and pulled her close. The darkness made every doubt grow louder. People began whispering prayers under their breath, asking for warmth, for safety, for the night to pass. And then, just as fear threatened to take hold again, Emily noticed something small, almost hidden. Lily was singing. Not loudly, not confidently, just a soft, trembling melody. The same tune she had hummed earlier, a child's simple worship in the middle of the cold. One by one, conversations quieted. People turned toward the sound, drawn to it, not because it was perfect, but because it was pure, because it reminded them that faith didn't disappear when the lights went out. Daniel wrapped an arm around Emily, listening. "She's braver than both of us," he whispered. Emily leaned her head against him. "She's teaching us." The cold still lingered, the power was still out, but something in the atmosphere shifted. Fear wasn't winning, not anymore. The room was still dim, lit only by a few emergency lights near the exits. No candles, no glow of decoration, just the barest hint of visibility. Yet even in that muted light, something began to happen. As Lily's quiet melody drifted through the chilled air, people instinctively drew closer, not for warmth alone, but for comfort. A trembling chorus of humming joined her, scattered and imperfect at first, then slowly aligning into something whole. The darkness had tried to divide them, but faith, small and unpolished, was pulling them together. Emily watched as a woman from the far corner carried her infant over to another mother to share a blanket. A teenage boy offered his coat to an elderly man. Volunteers moved between families, not with panic, but with gentle, reassuring hands. Micro loops of compassion kept rippling outward, one small act after another. Daniel exhaled a shaky breath. "Look at this. It's like the whole room changed." Emily felt it too. Not the cold, though it was still biting, but the presence of God settling among them in a way she couldn't explain, only feel. Not through warmth, not through light, but through unity. It struck her then. Maybe this night wasn't about surviving the storm. Maybe it was about discovering purpose inside it. Just as the thought settled, the fire department arrived with portable heaters. The door opened, letting in a slice of icy air, but also a flood of relief. Emily whispered a quiet, grateful, "Thank you, God," as volunteers and firefighters worked quickly to set up the units. When the first heater hummed to life, a soft wave of warmth began spreading through the room. People sighed with relief. Children unclenched from their parents' arms. Emily felt Daniel's shoulders loosen next to her. But Daniel was looking at something else, at the families still huddled together, sharing what little they had. His expression shifted, turning thoughtful, deeply moved. He turned to Emily. "All this time, I kept thinking our struggle was pointless, like we were just falling deeper every day." His voice trembled, but not with fear. "But being here, seeing how people take care of each other when they have so little, I think God put us here for more than survival." Emily placed her hand over his. "What do you mean?" "We know how it feels to lose everything. So maybe God is asking us to help others who feel the same, to be present, to lift them, to serve them. Not someday, now." His words hit her with unexpected clarity. This wasn't just a night of hardship, it was a calling forming right in front of them. Emily's eyes softened, her heart warmed beyond the temperature rising around them. "Maybe this is where fear becomes faith," she whispered. "Not when everything gets better, but when everything finally makes sense." A quiet stillness filled her chest, a holy stillness. She closed her eyes briefly and breathed another prayer, soft as a sigh. "Father, lead us. Use us however you want." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was surrender. And in that surrender, she felt peace settle like a gentle hand on her heart. The purpose behind their pain was beginning to shine through, not in comfort, but in calling. By the time the heaters restored warmth to the room, something far deeper had already taken root. The fear that once ruled the night no longer held authority. The atmosphere was different, gentler, unified, wrapped in a quiet strength that came not from circumstances, but from hearts shifting toward hope. Emily watched as Daniel moved across the room, helping pass out blankets, checking on families, speaking softly to those who looked the coldest or most afraid. He wasn't doing it out of obligation. He wasn't doing it to look strong. He was doing it because something inside him had awakened, something that felt like purpose. She felt Lily tug at her coat. "Mommy, Daddy's helping everyone." Emily smiled down at her. "Yes, sweetheart, God is using him." Lily beamed, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. When Daniel returned to them, he looked lighter somehow, still tired, still worn, but free in a way Emily hadn't seen in months. He sat beside her, letting out a long, honest breath. "You were right," he said. "God didn't abandon us. He was preparing us." He glanced around the room, watching volunteers and families working together as if they had known each other forever. "We came here broken, but maybe this is where we start rebuilding." Emily rested her head on his shoulder, a wave of emotion rising, gentle, grateful, steady. "I'm thankful," she whispered, "so thankful that God stayed with us, even when we couldn't see it." The gratitude in her voice wasn't forced. It wasn't hopeful pretending. It was real, born from what she had lived, survived, and now understood. Daniel placed a hand over hers. "I want us to give back, Em. Not when things are perfect, but starting now. I think that's the whole point. God gave us help tonight, so we could help others tomorrow." She nodded, heart swelling. "That's redemption, isn't it? Not just being lifted out of the storm, but becoming stronger because of it." They looked around the room. The community center that had once felt like a place of failure now felt like sacred ground, a place where fear had been stripped of its voice, and faith had quietly taken its place. Emily closed her eyes for just a breath, whispering her gratitude again in the stillness. Thank you, God, for turning our fear into faith. This Christmas Eve wasn't what she expected. It was better, because it revealed the God who had been carrying them all along. The days that followed moved quietly, like fresh snow settling over old footprints. Emily and Daniel returned to the community center, not as people seeking help, but as people offering it. What began on Christmas Eve as a moment of survival slowly grew into a rhythm of service. They volunteered on weekends, helped organize donation drives, and spent evenings listening to stories that sounded painfully close to their own. And each time they showed up, they remembered that night when darkness filled the room. And God filled their hearts. Lily became the center's unofficial helper, handing out toys, coloring pages, and warmth that no heater could ever match. Her simple joy reminded everyone that faith didn't need to be complicated to be powerful. One late afternoon, as the sun set in soft winter gold, Emily stood by the entrance watching Daniel help carry supplies inside. The community center hummed with life, families talking, volunteers laughing, children running. What once felt like a place of loss had become a place of purpose. Daniel joined her, snowflakes dusting his shoulders. "Hard to believe how much changed in just a few days," he said. Emily nodded, her heart full. It wasn't just a hard Christmas, it was the Christmas God rebuilt us. A gentle stillness filled the moment, not dramatic, not loud, just sacred. Emily closed her eyes briefly, whispering a simple expression of worship that rose naturally from her soul. "God, you are faithful." She opened her eyes to see Daniel watching her with a tender smile. "I think this is the beginning of something new." Emily slipped her hand into his. "A legacy of gratitude, of helping others the way God helped us." As families passed by, offering warm greetings and quiet thanks, Emily felt a beautiful truth settle in her spirit. Their story had become more than a personal survival. It had become a light for others, still walking through the dark. Christmas Eve didn't change their circumstances overnight, but it changed their hearts forever. Emily and Daniel learned that fear loses its power when faith steps forward, even in the cold, even in the dark, even when nothing seems certain. God had been working long before they saw the evidence, weaving purpose through every trial, guiding them toward a calling they never expected. And when they finally looked back, they understood. The night they thought would break them became the night that built them, because God was there. In the smallest moments, in the quietest prayers, in the unexpected kindness that arrived right on time, everything had a purpose. If this story touched your heart today, pause for a moment and breathe it in. Remember, no matter how dark a season may feel, God is already working in ways you can't yet see. Just like Emily and Daniel, you are not forgotten. You are not alone. There is purpose unfolding in your journey even now. If this message brought you hope, I'd love for you to stay with us. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment below telling us your city and country. We want to pray for your home, your family, and your story. Your engagement helps these reflections reach more hearts around the world. Thank you for being here. May God continue guiding your steps, one quiet miracle at a time.